There is a moment in Blazing Saddles that almost nobody talks about. Not the campfire scene. Not the fourth wall break at the end. Not even the infamous bean scene. It is something quieter than all of that, something that was sitting right in front of audiences for over 50 years, and almost nobody caught it. Gene Wilder finally spoke about it in detail, and once you understand what he was doing and why, the entire film changes. You stop seeing a wild, anarchic comedy and start seeing something much more carefully constructed. Something that only worked because one man refused to do what everyone else was doing. That let's start at the beginning. Because the beginning of this story is already stranger than most people realize. When Mel Brooks started production on Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder was not in the picture. The role of the Waco Kid, the aging gunslinger who ends up sharing a jail cell with Sheriff Bart, had already been cast. Gig Young was the man, an Oscar-winning actor with a polished Hollywood resume, and the kind of dignified presence that seemed perfect for the burned-out gunslinger. On paper, the casting made total sense. In reality, it fell apart before the cameras had barely started rolling. On the very first morning of production, Gig Young showed up on set visibly unwell. He was sweating through his clothes, shaking so badly he could barely hold himself upright, and slurring words he hadn't even tried to say yet. Some people on set assumed it was nerves. Others thought maybe he was doing some kind of method preparation for the rolling-off a man falling apart. But it became clear very quickly that what was happening had nothing to do with acting. Young was in acute alcohol withdrawal, a serious medical condition, and by mid-morning he had collapsed entirely. Production shut down. The studio had a problem, and Mel Brooks had maybe hours to figure out what to do next. Brooks did not hold auditions. He did not call his agent or negotiate with the studio. He picked up the phone and called one person, Gene Wilder. The two had already worked together on The Producers, so Brooks knew exactly what Wilder was capable of. He knew how Wilder thought, how he moved through a scene, and most importantly, he trusted him. What happened next is the part that still feels almost unbelievable when you hear it. Wilder said yes without asking a single question. No script request. No discussion about pay. No inquiry into what the role actually involved. He just agreed, packed a bag, and flew out the next day. He arrived on set jet-lagged and having had essentially no preparation time. And yet by the time the cameras rolled on his first scene, he was already fully inside the character. Not fumbling through lines. Not feeling out the role. Already there, already the Waco Kid, like he had been living in those boots for years. That level of instinctive command is rare in any actor. But what Wilder did with the role once he was in it, that is the part most fans have never fully understood. Here is what Gene Wilder revealed, and what changes everything when you hear it. He made a deliberate, conscious decision before shooting a single frame. He was not going to play the Waco Kid for laughs. In a movie that was built from the ground up on slapstick, absurdism, racial satire, and constant fourth-wall chaos, Wilder quietly told Mel Brooks that he intended to play his character completely straight. No mugging for the camera. No exaggerated reactions. No winking at the audience. He was going to treat the Waco Kid as a real person, a genuinely damaged man, and let everyone else be the comedy around him. Brooks agreed. And that single decision, quiet as it was, became the invisible foundation that held the entire film together. Think about what Blazing Saddles is doing at full volume. Characters are screaming. Hedley Lamar is chewing scenery at a rate that would exhaust lesser actors. Mongo is punching horses. The townspeople are walking cartoons of ignorance and bigotry, played broadly and without mercy. The whole film is loud, fast, irreverent, and deliberately offensive in service of its satire. It is a film that does not stop moving or stop pushing. And then there is the Waco Kid. Wilder enters the film lying in a jail cell, half drunk, barely lifting his head. He delivers his first lines with almost no effort at all, like a man who stopped caring about impressing anyone a long time ago. There is no performance in it, no attempt to be funny. And because of that, he is immediately the most interesting person in the room. In a movie full of characters shouting for attention, the one man who refuses to shout becomes impossible to look away from. This is the thing Wilder understood that most actors in his position might have missed. Comedy does not always live in the loudest choice. Sometimes it lives in the stillest one that when the Waco Kid explains his trembling hands in the jailhouse scene, tracing the story off how he went from the fastest gun in the West to a shaking wreck in a jail cell. Wilder does not play it for irony. He does not smirk or let the audience know he is in on the joke. He plays it as genuine grief, as confession. The line is funny, yes, but it is funny in a way that also aches a little, and that ache is entirely Wilder's contribution. It was not written into the script. It came from an actor who decided that the funniest version of this character was also the saddest one. That Mel Brooks would later say that Gene brought an emotional intelligence to the role that nobody on the production had anticipated. The Waco Kid was supposed to be a comedic sidekick, a functional character who helped Sheriff Bart navigate an absurd world. Wilder turned him into something closer to a tragic figure playing at comedy. A man using dry wit and detachment as armor against a past that clearly broke him. The hand tremors, the detachment, the weary flatness of his delivery. Wilder made a quiet case that these are not just gags, but symptoms of something real. Post-traumatic damage, dressed up in jokes. And that is what audiences felt without being able to name it. That is why the Waco Kid lingers in memory, even as the louder performances fade. You can quote Hedley Lamarr for laughs, but it is Wilder's stillness you carry with you. There is another layer to this story that most people do not know, and it involves Richard Pryor. Before Blazing Saddles went into production, Pryor was not only one of the key writers on the film, shaping its voice and sharpening its commentary on race and power in America. He was also supposed to be in it. Mel Brooks had championed Pryor for the role of Sheriff Bart from early on, recognizing that Pryor had a raw comedic energy and a cultural perspective that was essential to the story they were trying to tell. But executives, made nervous by Pryor's public controversies and his well-documented struggles with substance use, blocked the casting. Cleveland Little stepped into the role and delivered a genuinely powerful performance. But Pryor's absence from the screen did not mean his absence from the film. His fingerprints are all over the script, in the rhythm of the jokes, in the sharpness of the racial satire, in the refusal to soften or apologize for what the film was saying. Wilder later acknowledged this directly, crediting Pryor's script contributions with giving Blazing Saddles its real bite. Pryor shaped the emotional honesty of the movie without ever appearing in it, which is a remarkable thing to be able to say about anyone. Gene Wilder never expressed bitterness about the Pryor casting situation, but he did reflect on what might have been. The two of them would go on to work together in Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, and the chemistry they found in those films was undeniable. The contrast between Wilder's slow-burning restraint and Pryor's explosive spontaneity created something neither of them could have produced alone. Had that pairing happened in Blazing Saddles first, it might have changed the entire trajectory of both careers. It remains one of Hollywood's most genuinely fascinating what-ifs. Behind the scenes, Wilder's influence on the production extended well beyond his own performance. The set of Blazing Saddles was not a relaxed environment. There was constant pressure from the studio, which wanted changes to the script, softer language, toned-down satire, scenes that addressed racism without making audiences too uncomfortable. Mel Brooks was fighting on multiple fronts at once, managing those demands while also shepherding a wildly creative and unpredictable cast through a production that had already had one major crisis before it even properly began. That I in the middle of all that chaos, Wilder was the calm. People who worked on the film remember him as someone who rarely raised his voice, who never demanded attention, but whose presence made a difference in the room. Between takes, he would offer quiet guidance to other actors, small adjustments to timing or emphasis, delivered without lecturing or drawing attention to himself. Some crew members described him as an unofficial director of tone, the person who kept the balance between the film's absurdity and its sincerity from tipping too far in either direction. That he also backed Brooks completely in the fight against studio interference. Wilder understood what the film was trying to do. He knew that sanitizing the racial satire would have gutted the film's purpose. The discomfort was not accidental, it was the point. When Brooks was pressured to rewrite scenes involving slurs or to soften the portrayal of the townspeople's ignorance, Wilder stood behind him, not loudly, but firmly. His credibility, particularly following the success of the producers, gave his support real weight. In a film known for breaking every rule of polite comedy, Wilder's off-screen resolve was just as subversive as anything on screen. There is one more piece of this story that most fans have never connected, and it might be the most remarkable of all. During the downtime on the set of Blazing Saddles, between takes and in the quiet hours of production, Gene Wilder started talking to Mel Brooks about a new idea. Not a pitch, exactly. More like a question he had been turning over in his mind. What if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted nothing to do with the family name? What if he had spent his whole life running from a legacy he was ashamed of, and then found himself pulled back into it against his will? Brooks initially brushed it off. He had enough on his plate with Blazing Saddles already, and the idea seemed like a distraction. But Wilder believed in it enough to sit down and write a draft without any guarantee that it would go anywhere. When Brooks finally read what Wilder had put together, he changed his mind immediately. The combination offer homage, character-driven comedy, and genuine emotional stakes was too good to ignore. Within days, what had started as a passing thought between takes on a Western spoof became the foundation for Young Frankenstein, one of the most beloved horror comedies ever made. It is difficult to overstate what that means. Two of the greatest comedy films of the 1970s share the same origin point. Blazing Saddles was not just a film, it was the incubator for what came next. Wilder's ability to hold two creative tracks in his mind simultaneously, fully inhabiting one role while quietly developing the next idea, speaks to a kind of creative intelligence that rarely gets the recognition it deserves. He was not just an actor interpreting someone else's vision. He was a filmmaker in the truest sense, building the future between takes. When you look at the legacy of Blazing Saddles as a whole, it is easy to focus on the loudest parts. The jokes that shocked audiences in 1974, the fourth wall break, the campfire scene, the sheer audacity of what Mel Brooks put on screen. All of that is real and all of it deserves the recognition it gets. But the reason the film has lasted, the reason it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry, the reason it still holds up when so much comedy from that era does not, a significant part of that reason is a man laying in a jail cell, barely lifting his head, delivering a confession disguised as a punchline. Gene Wilder proved something with the Waco Kid that Hollywood rarely remembers and audiences almost never consciously recognize. He proved that in a film full of noise, the most powerful thing you can do is be quiet. That restraint is not weakness. That stillness, used correctly, pulls the audience in harder than any amount of shouting ever could. That the funniest characters are often the ones who hurt the most, and the best comedy isolays hiding something true underneath the laugh. Most fans watched Blazing Saddles and saw the spectacle. They saw the outrageousness and the satire and the chaos. What they didn't see, what Gene Wilder finally explained, was the invisible architecture holding all of it upright. The quiet performance at the center of the storm. The actor who said no to playing it for laughs, and in doing so made everything around him funnier, sharper, and more human. That is what was hiding in plain sight all along. Not a deleted scene, not a behind-the-scenes secret. Just a man who understood something about comedy that most people never figure out, and who was gracious enough, eventually, to explain it.